Greetings, everyone. Welcome. My name is David McLeod. I am your life mastery coach, and I want to welcome you to Soul Empowerment. This is, believe it or not, episode number 65. And our title today is Experience, Friend or Foe. Well, we're going to have fun talking about this for sure. But before I even get started on that, I'm going to invite my co-hosts to introduce themselves one at a time and share a little bit about who they are, where they are, what they do, and why. And today I'm going to start with you, Scott.
Why, thank you, David. Welcome, everybody. My name is Scott Holmes. I live south of Boston. I am a Reiki master. I do coaching and energy work. And what I found is most people are just looking to find themselves. Isn't that amazing? Finding yourself when it's there all the time. By doing all of the tools that we've learned over the years to be able to come in to yourself, you too can and will feel that peace, that calm, and that centeredness.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. And next up, Gail, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what you do and why.
Sure. Thank you, David, and welcome. Welcome, everyone. I am Gail Nowak. I am also in Massachusetts. Scott and I live on opposite sides, opposite shores, that is, of Boston. I work with spirit-led coaches and leaders in the wellness space who are tired of trying to market themselves in ways that don't feel true. I work with clients and help them create a path back to their authentic voice so that they can communicate boldly, lead lovingly, and make the world a better place without hiding or silencing themselves. And my work is also part energy, part practical, part strategic. And it's really designed to lead holistic practitioners and light workers from hiding in plain sight to becoming a bold and gentle leader in the new earth paradigm.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Gail. Sarah, tell us who you are, where you are, what you do, and why.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jane. Welcome to everybody, and thank you to David, Scott, and Gail. I'm in the UK, on the south coast, not so little place called Bournemouth. I work with energy, as all of us do, and I'm the creator or the founder of Gift of Healing TV. And I think the aim of that has always been for me, not only to interview people and get them to share meditations and exercises, the techniques and practices they bring, but to create a resource where people can find information. So it's helping the individuals to get themselves out there in a video format, as well as having information available for people who are looking for it. I also work with the energy of sound and helping people to reconnect with their inner child and building their confidence. So it's a confidence thing, I think, all the way around, but I think that's what we all do in our own unique way. And I love doing it. I do it because I love it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I think it's interesting that, we all, whether we actually use these words or not, we all work with energy. And I think, Scott, you hit the nail right on the head. There's, in my personal view nowadays, and it's taken me quite a few years to figure this out, there's nothing more important than knowing the truth about who you really are. And the problem is many of us have lived our lives according to how we think we are as opposed to how we really are. And we've allowed other people to define us. We've allowed our experiences actually to define us. And that's part of the reason we're going to have this conversation the way we do now. For me, I like to work with people. I like to help them get into the darker places, the places of the belief systems that they don't necessarily know they have, the unconscious stuff. It's called dark because we don't look in there very much, But actually, if you take the time to do that deep introspection and look into those dark spaces, it's really not so dark at all. And in fact, it can be very illuminating once you understand a little bit more about who you really are. So I want everybody to take that and keep it in mind as we embark on this, our 65th episode, Experience, Friend or Foe. And I just want to read a little bit about the write-up that I had sent out at the beginning, because I want to set the stage for our conversation. So experience is the lens through which we interpret the world. It's definitely a teacher, but strangely, it can also be a trap. Neuroscientific research suggests that our brains are wired to categorize and store experiences as patterns, shaping our expectations and reactions into the future. The amygdala, for instance, tags emotionally charged events, reinforcing avoidance or attraction behaviors. And meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex helps us contextualize these memories, allowing for growth or, somewhat alarmingly, rigid biases. I'm sure some of us here can admit to having had some biases from time to time, and maybe we still do, who knows? So the whole point I'm trying to make here is that the duality highlights the idea that experience can be both a compass for wisdom and growth, or a cage for preconceptions. So that's kind of where we're going to go with this conversation. And I'm going to just open up the floor. Who feels called at this moment to say something about what I've done in our introduction? Who's going to go first? Yay, Scott.
So when we first posed this, I looked at it and said, "Oh crap," because most of my young adult life was about experiential and about it really closing me in. From teenage years to 20s and through my early 30s, it was all about conditioning me to do the straight and narrow path. Always. I didn't find this work until I was in my 60s. So I was slowly through my 50s, but in my 60s, I hit 60, and that's when all of this came forward. And I felt like I had to lose all of those layers that I had on top of me in order to find me again. And it wasn't that I wasn't there, it's that I couldn't see myself. I could not see myself. Experiences. So it was all about family, roles, responsibilities, and that framed for me absolutely everything that went on through my adult life. And I thought that those were the rules that I had to follow till the end, all the way to the end, right? I would be 90 on my deathbed and I would still be living by the same rules. Well, come to find out, I didn't have to. I didn't have to live by those. That I could find out who I was. And in that search, going in, it just opened everything up to the possibilities. And now the experiences I have continuously open me up to other things. They don't close me down. And that's, I think, the learning that I've had over the last few years, to be able to open up to those things and not have a rigidity, not have a bias, not have judgment. I used to have harsh judgments about everything and everybody because I knew what was best, and I thought they should, of course, do it my way. Until I traveled and I realized that so much of the world, they do the best they can, and they do it from their frame of reference and their experiences, and that's how they would do it. So to start this off, it's, damn, I really look at myself as just very, very small, very, very tight, very limited when I was younger. And now the expansion has just amazing.
Yeah. That's pretty fascinating. I know that, for me, just the idea, when I hear the word experience, it has a whole bunch of different meanings in my mind. But when someone describes something that sounds interesting to me, I say, oh, I think I'd like to experience that. And so I sometimes go and maybe go try something new because I have this this anticipation that it's going to give me some kind of a, I don't know, well, it's going to give me an experience. But it's going to give me a high, it's going to give me an emotional charge, it's going to give me some kind of energetic movement that I'm going to enjoy. That's kind of the reason that, no, not all experiences, of course, create that. Some experiences we don't actually wish upon ourselves, and we get them anyway, and they turned out to be quite unpleasant. But I think what I have come to realize is this whole concept, by the way, this whole conversation, this topic came up because I read a very brief paragraph by Krishnamurti. Have you heard of Krishnamurti? The guy's a pretty brilliant writer, and he died years ago, but he was back in the early 20th century, I think. That's when he was doing his writings. But anyway, he asked the question, how experiences are great. Everybody likes them. But how do they limit the way you think? Because the moment you've had the experience, if you associate and identify with that experience, you can expect that any other time you engage in those activities, you're going to have the same experience, the same result, and or you might say to yourself, well, been there, done that, don't need to do it again, kind of thing, so the experience has both a positive and a negative aspect associated with it. And that's really where this idea came from. And I remember when I was talking about, I think Sarah and I were the only ones planning this. It was just a really amazing conversation. And that's why I thought maybe other people can benefit from this. So anyway, I'm sorry, Gail, you look like you're ready to say something. So go ahead.
Yeah. So it's just fascinating because, I mean, this is experience right here, right? We're always experiencing. We're here to have an experience. And so I feel like we could come at this from many different angles. We can talk about experience, like a memorable experience that maybe is unique and maybe once in a lifetime or a couple of times in your life, right? And then there's the mundane experiences, getting up, brushing your teeth, the things that we sort of take for granted, but they're still experience. And I also find it really interesting. I was listening to Scott and really relating to a lot of what Scott was saying. It's so interesting to me to have experiences in our past that maybe when we were in the process of experiencing them, they were amazing or they were unpleasant, like you said. And we can then remember or think on or even sort of re-experience that from a completely different frame of mind, from a completely different energy, and give it a completely different meaning. So I see experience as, number one, information, right? Mm-hmm. This when we are able to sort of be open and allowing, and kind of in tune with how we're responding to these experiences, it's information. I see it as information, right? And we can choose to experience the same thing, maybe try something different, maybe make some changes. And I think it's also true that sometimes we defer our creator mode a little bit and get kind of hooked into certain experiences, and then that starts to lead us into places of like limiting beliefs or kind of expecting things to be a certain way when in fact we can create our own experience. It's not the experience shaping us. Well, it could be. It could be the experience shaping us, and it's also true that we can create the experience. So I don't know, there's a lot. This is a very philosophical topic, I think.
Right. Sarah, what do you have to say about this? You got to unmute yourself.
That might help. I'm just sort of thinking about, if you like, my life quake, my wake up call, because that was an experience. yes, as Gail said, we've had many experiences, as Scott said, yet we live our lives in that. And as a people pleaser, you absolutely are living a life that is really sort of controlled by others. But it was the wake up, the life quake. And yes, that was a pretty horrendous experience. You know, broken jaw that gave 6 months of pain and sleepless nights. The exhaustion. But when I asked to go and see a psychotherapist, one of the things she said to me was, you never know when you are being lucky. And if you would ask me what's the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me, probably that broken jaw, which sounds really ridiculous considering what it put me through. But if it hadn't put me through what it did, I wouldn't have been so exhausted that I had to stop the people pleasing and let my marriage go, and the job got taken away and I stopped studying accountancy. My life, when I actually took the courage to break my marriage up, my life changed. So these so-called and not good experiences can turn out to be something you would never change for what they actually helped you to do. And it's being able to sit in that place when something happens, stay out of judgment of what's going on, why is it going on? It's just, okay. And it's just like, okay, there's a reason behind this. Can I find that reason? It doesn't mean things are comfortable. I go through uncomfortable things. Yes, I do. But it's about, what is it helping me to remember maybe about myself? What is it about? It's supporting my growth. And that is definitely what that broken jaw did. You know, as I've put it in a book just recently, after my accident as a child and the insecurities that brought up in me, I built a brick wall around me. And everything that happened just put more and more bricks into that wall, solidifying that wall. And that broken jaw was what was the start of the collapse of that brick wall, supporting me to find me.
Right.
And so experiences are very important. It's just, which part of the mind do you go into when you're actually going through it? And I get it. It's not easy.
Right. Well, that brings up a great question. I mean, so is it choice? Is it destiny? Is it free will? Is it fate? How do these experiences come into our lives in the first place?
I think it's a mix. I think that I personally believe that we as souls choose to have the earth experience. There may be some particular contracts, predestined sort of events along our path, and I also think that we have free will. So some of it fate, is some of it destiny, is some of it the result of the choices that we make. I think it's a mix of all of that.
Cool.
Wow.
Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to have to piggyback on what Gail said. I really feel it is a combination. And the other is that, and for those of us who believe it, that soul contract we have of when we agree to come here into this 3D form, taking it to another level. And such as my daughter, who became ill at 13 months old and then died at 13. In doing the work around that, as horrific as that was, as life altering for me as that was her, in talking with mediums, that was her contract. She knew she wasn't going to be in this world for that very long. Not what I anticipated. And in walking through all of that with her, the experiences I gained, because I spent an inordinate amount of time in hospitals and in advocating for handicapped children. I went to the state level and helped write legislation for handicapped children. I advocated for others. I was on the committee for the nursing home where she was residing, and helped maintain the quality of life for each of those 62 kids that were there. Things that I would never, ever consider myself capable of doing. But because of the experience of walking with my daughter, I saw sides of myself that I never thought I could. As stripping as that was, as scary as that was, as a parent, not being able to heal your child or make them better. You can't, there are certain things in life you can't put a Band-Aid on and give them a kiss and wish them out the door. It doesn't happen. So those experiences, but it also changed how I saw life overall, in that how precious it was and how I was grateful for what little I had or how much I had. That gratitude aspect of it, it really gave me that perspective. So while it was miserable going through it, I was gifted with different aspects of my personality and understanding of myself that I never would have had otherwise.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. One thing I know about contracts is that every contract can be renegotiated at any time. If for some reason you don't like the terms and conditions of your contract, you can find a way out of it completely, or you can renegotiate with the other counterparties and find a different agreement, a different commitment that you want to make. The second thing I know about contracts is they are absolutely useless if either party does not have the integrity to abide by the contract. So then you have a broken contract and other kinds of problems come into being. The third thing I know about a contract is I always have a choice about whether I make a commitment to that contract. Therefore, from my perspective, everything boils down to choice. Everything boils down to free will. Even in the direst of circumstances, one thing that can never be taken away from me is the truth of who I really am. Sure, my body can be destroyed and, I could be killed, as we say in the physical world, or other bad things might happen that don't result in death. But that doesn't matter. I mean, all of those things are choices that I can make, right? The other thing is I will agree with both you, Scott, and you, Gail, about this idea of a soul contract, even though I don't like the word contract in this context. I do believe that we all made some kind of an agreement prior to manifesting on the real world, or in the physical world, I should say, not necessarily the real world. Before manifesting here, we made some agreements about what it was we wanted to accomplish, what we wanted to experience, what we wanted to get out of this physical experience. Now, that doesn't mean we went into ultra fine, fine-tooth comb detail. In other words, I probably didn't make an agreement or a contract with anybody that I was going to have a car accident on August 11th, 2013. But I think that at the bigger picture, my contract, my desire was to know the deepest truth of who I really am. And in order to get that experience, I had to first deny who I really was. And therefore I had to buy into the stories and the societal implications and all of the, conformity and compliance and everything that goes along with that. I kind of agreed to do that so that I could have the experience of what it feels like to forget who I really am, and then get the resentment and anger and everything else that comes up as a result of that, so that I can finally explode my way out of it and start to reconnect to the truth of who I really am. But some of the experiences along the way after that wake up, apparently I didn't do quite enough, because the universe said, look, you're just kind of wandering around like with your head up your butt. It's time to wake up for real. And the car accident was something that just took me one step further. And it was like a miraculous car accident. It's something that I still today, to this day, I get chills thinking about it. You know, being guided between two trees and landing on top of a deer and having, it was just such an experience that I would never actually wish upon myself or upon anybody else. But I'm, as Sarah said, I am so grateful that I had that experience, because it's helped me to see how I was kind of wandering through life in a sleepwalking mode, even though I had already begun the wake up process. You know what I mean? So did I make an agreement to have that? Did I call for that into my life? I believe on some level I did invite it in, but not necessarily in a conscious way, not necessarily saying, oh, I think it's time for me to have a car accident so I can wake up. No, not at all. Something else was going on. There was my soul was saying, gotta wake up, gotta wake up, gotta wake up. And my soul was probably communicating with my other spiritual allies and saying, okay, what can we do to wake this guy up so that he can complete his mission? And somebody said, well, how about this? Bing, knocks me out. I'm falling asleep at the wheel, and bang, next thing I know, I'm waking up looking at these two trees behind my car. Free will? I don't know. On some level, it was free will because I chose the events that led up to it. Was it fated? I don't know, maybe. But I am inclined to believe that everything ultimately boils down to free will. So that's just my position. And sorry, I took too long there. Sarah, you want to talk? Go ahead.
Well, no, I think isn't it the free will of our soul to have the experiences it's chosen? So the soul at that point has a choice of what it wishes to experience. To me, everything that I went through, I agreed to the accident as a child. My sister, that was agreement. She was only coming in for 9 weeks. She was not staying for longer than that. That was all agreement. That was an agreement between her, my parents, and myself. So it's not a matter of, it's just about my soul. It's about all those. For me, this is my belief. We choose our parents. We have an agreement with our siblings. We have an agreement with many other people throughout our lives as they come in and out. So have we all got an agreement that we're going to be doing this for however long we do it, sort of. But for me, the wake up, it was an agreement that I would go so long in my life and I would be given that life quake, that wake up call. My choice as to whether I chose to listen to it or not. It was my choice whether I could stay asleep. It was my choice to wake up and to realize that there was way more to life than I was living. And boy, have I gone out to have some experiences since. And I haven't cared. One other than leaving my marriage, one of the first things I did was agree to have an abseil off the local water tower, sort of close to here. My mother's reaction, it's why I would never have done it in the past for fear of what people thought of me. My mother, you can't go doing that. Yes, I can. And I did it twice.
Right.
I didn't just do it once. I did it twice. The trouble was it was raining, so we came down slower the second time than the first. But that's beside the point. I allowed myself to step outside the comfort zone that was so blooming uncomfortable, I couldn't do it anymore. So I think it's a matter of, I suppose I listened to the experience. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know any of this stuff at that stage. But it was understanding somehow that my ex and myself were living in parallel ruts. His was lined with rose petals, mine was lined with rose thorns. And eventually it got too uncomfortable to stay in. And that's the comfort zone. The comfort zone was that rut. What I didn't understand at the time was to step outside your comfort zone is to step back into yourself. Because the comfort zone is outside of you. And what's the saying? There is no growth in your comfort zone. And so by saying no to that painful rut, I started saying yes to me and a life I could then go out and really start living.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, so I guess the question now is, I mean, there's lots more we could talk about on that topic, but I want to make sure we move along, and I want to make sure we cover all the talking points that we had set out. I mean, one of the challenges of experience is this notion of bias. I gotta ask, how does experience affect the way you think, and could it be positive, negative? Give me some input on your perspective on that idea.
Okay. Okay, Karen.
You go, Sarah.
Okay. I think prior to the wake up, it would have really affected me. It would have caused a judgment. Why is that person doing that? Why did they do that to me? It was me, but the judgment to a certain degree was more on what have I done? What did I do to deserve that? Rather than realizing it actually had nothing to do with me. And when we can step outside that is their stuff, it's not mine. You're stepping out of judgment. Some people would call it judgment, but the thought of what are they going through? What's going on in their life? What has happened in their life that has made them be like that, to say those things, to do those things? Is that a judgment or is that a caring? And there are going to be different people who do think about it differently. But I actually attempt these days, rather than, why did they say that about me? Why did they do that? It's their stuff. It's what's going on in their life. They have their choices. They have their experiences to have. I don't have to get involved in them. That's my choice.
You know, I think that certainly bias does imply a level of judgment, conclusion, interpretation, whatever. But I don't think biases generally are considered to be somewhat unconscious. We're not necessarily aware of our tendency to lean a certain way, or to choose a certain thing, or to have a particular preference, or to do this or to do that. And by the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with having preferences. You know, I don't think there's anything. Some biases may be quite good viruses. That's interesting. Good biases, and some biases may be not so good. The question is, does a bias necessarily mean that you're a bad person? And where do these biases come from? And I think that part of the answer has to do with the experiences that we've had in life. You know, if I've constantly had an experience that a certain kind of people disrespect me, I may come to avoid those certain kind of people, right? And and that's not even necessarily a conscious bias. I mean, maybe it is. I could maybe do some digging and find out, but it may be happening on an unconscious level. I just kind of I walk across the other side of the street when I see people like that. I avoid this part of the country, or this part of the city, or this part of the town, or even this part of the house. You know, we do it primarily, I think, because we have this ego mind that says you got to protect yourself from that situation. Now, the soul, of course, I don't think the soul really does have any biases. The true soul, our true soul nature, is capable of unconditional love, is capable of unconditional positive regard for every other being everywhere. But that doesn't necessarily mean that our physical behavior is going to reflect what our soul is capable of doing. You know, we still have ego minds, and sometimes we're still going to react, and sometimes we're still going to have a negative consequence, even though our soul later on will come back to our soul and say, wow, I really wish I hadn't done that. You know, so that's kind of where I'm coming from with this question on bias. You know, Gail, what do you want to say about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of our human nature. You know, how do you, as I'm listening, I agree that from a soul perspective, we're love, we're a frequency of love, and we're capable of unconditional love, and we're having a human experience. And so
Right.
that brings a whole bunch of judgment, biases, fear, ego. That's part of what we agreed to to be here.
Yeah.
And I think like this is a great question. It's a little bit of I feel like it's this could be its own episode. But what's coming to me is when you're aware of bias and that bias is no longer working, either for you or for those you care about. Yeah, maybe there's a judgment or a decision around that. But I don't know if bias is inherently good or bad. It just is. And I don't know, you know, from a human perspective, how it's possible for anyone to have no biases. I'm not sure that that's a realistic thing. I think it's a noble pursuit. I think that staying open and curious can help us maybe release some biases that are unfair, judgmental, not working, and help us grow and be more loving and accepting. But yeah, you raise a good question here about is it so bad to have that? Because we're going to have our preferences. Those lived experiences are going to have an impact on us, and I believe that they're meant to have an impact on us, and are meant to continue to have an impact on us so that we can evolve and grow.
Right. Yeah, I think that it's really important that to recognize. I think the word bias and the word preference are synonyms, even though they're not necessarily used that way in the mainstream, right? And I think everybody's preference is perfectly okay to me. I don't really care what you prefer, just as long as I don't have to prefer it because you prefer it. You know, it's like Sarah said early on here in the beginning of our conversation. Sometimes you have to wake up and learn to say no to what's not true for you in order to embrace who you really are. Well, the moment you say no, you're declaring a preference. And that may be a bias. I guess my real question is the bias influenced by the experience, or does the bias lead to the experience? Which is which? Maybe both. I don't know. What do you think, Scott?
I would say one leads to the other, back and forth. So you experience it. You drink coffee. Oh man, that's terrible. That's bitter. Okay, let me add some cream. Wow, that's better. Let me add some sugar. Wow, I really like that coffee. So my preference is I want cream and sugar in my coffee. Okay, so you out of the country and they don't, or you go somewhere else and they don't happen to have cream and you say, well, I don't know if I should drink it. And you drink the coffee and it's very good. it's black. It's like, well, I don't drink my coffee that way. However, I really like this. So my question, and to answer yours, is the preference is I want it in a certain way. It leads to the experience of that's the way I always want it, until you change that experience. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute. Wow. I mean, I don't have to have cream and sugar in my coffee in order to enjoy it. So I wanted to bring it back to the
Speaking of which,
speaking of which, so we're in doing the bias. Yes, I think it's used in a really strong connotation. They use it as prejudice. Okay, they use a bias as prejudice, meaning we prejudge it, and so therefore we've already made up our mind. But in real life, we look for the comfort zone, right? We look for the place where it's ease. So I'm going to have sugar and cream in my coffee when I'm home because it's easy and I know it tastes right. When I choose to go outside of that and experience something outside of that, that's when I'm open to it. As I've gotten older, okay, I did this thing when I was dealing with the yogi, and she had me write down everything that I judged. Talk about judgment,
God.
right? Okay.
My list would be very long.
All right. We're driving in Massachusetts, so it was about every other block. So just in that prejudging and like, what the heck are they doing? Why are they doing that? Why are they, left-hand turn? And what it really did was it focused on me of like, really, you're the perfect driver and everything you've done has always been great. And so, wait a minute, you don't know what's going on. When you got 3 kids yelling in the back and you're trying to find way and you're lost, you're not going to make the right decision because not sure where you're going. Okay, you're not in their circumstance. I am judging that they're a bad driver simply because of they didn't use their turn signal when they took the left. Okay. But I don't know what their circumstances are. I don't know what's going on around them. So after the first couple of days of writing all this stuff down, of judging, and it was just eye-opening for me, I all of a sudden stepped back and went, it kind of just observed. And the judgment started falling away. It's not that I don't have judgments or bias about things. It's just all those little things that I judge very quickly fell away. And I just allow things to be because it's, as you said, Sarah, it has nothing to do with me. They're doing whatever they're doing. Why do I have a judgment on it? I don't expect other people to judge the way I live, nor, by the way, do I care anymore. But it's that use of words, and sometimes our English language is so inhibiting for expression, and words take on new meanings, and it just gets blown up. And so I'm glad that we can be much more precise. I'm glad that we have the 4 of us sitting here talking about something that we can be thoughtful and vulnerable and be able to shape those things so that one word doesn't describe absolutely everything. And here we are describing all of our different experiences and what we see. And it's wonderful to be able to do that and thresh those things out. And I know that I learn something new every time we sit down together.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the subject of judgment, because judgment has a bad rap. The idea, if I'm judgmental, it means I'm a bad person. It means I'm a harsh person. It means all kinds of things in somebody's mind. But I'm going to just point something out to you. I make judgments all the time, constantly. There is no time when I'm not judging something. And just to give you a real simple example, let's say I'm cooking some dinner or something for myself. And I'm preparing something and I say, oh, too much salt or not enough salt. There's judgment right there. Or this is overcooked or undercooked or not too hot, too cold. Anytime I use phrases like that, I'm judging. In fact, I'll go a step further. The moment you say anything, you use a noun to describe something, right? You've made a judgment. You've had to interpret data in front of you, and you've made a judgment that this is a box, let's say. Well, it gets worse than that, my friends, because the moment you use an adjective, that's when the judgment really starts getting bigger and bigger. This is a brown box. This is a torn box. This is a crumpled box. You see what I'm saying? So every single one of those statements, even if you don't actually say it out loud, you just think it, it's a judgment. It's an interpretation of data that's happening right in front of you. So there's nothing wrong with judgment. And not only that, you could look at the same box I'm looking at and disagree with me completely. You might say, it's not a box. What are you talking about? Or because your idea of a box is some kind of maybe rectangular shape or something, and this thing happens to be round or some whatever. I don't care. But you have this idea of what a box looks like. And I've said this is a crumpled box, and you say, wait a minute, that's not even a box, and it ain't crumpled. It's rippled. So we have an argument about our judgments. That's kind of the nature of our life, isn't it? Right? Well, elevate this into more personal conversations. If I say to you, you're so mean. Well, that's a judgment, obviously, but is it true? What do I mean by that when I say you're mean? What I mean by that is if I'm truthful, I'm feeling sadness or fear because what you said reminded me of something that my mom did when I was 5 years old. And I put the label mean on that situation. So do you see the experience that happened, in my case, 67 years ago, is labeled mean, and now I see you behaving in a similar manner, and I bring out the old mean label and plop it on top of you. That is what we do, and that's all ego mind stuff. So is it bad? I'm going to say it's bad. I'm going to say I could pause. I could take a moment and take a look inside and say, what do I really mean by that? And notice what's really going on for me, that I've been triggered somehow because of something that you did, and you had no idea about it. It's not your fault. It's my own stuff, right? So let's not berate each other because we happen to have judgments or biases or preferences or anything that you want to call it. Let's start to have some compassion for each other. After all, if I have it and you have it, maybe we all have it. So that's what I want to say about that. I think let's not give judgment a worse rap than it's already got.
What about a judgment call, right? We say, use that term a lot. It's a judgment call. Okay, so you take everything in your experience of what's happened, what the data that you have in front of you, and you make a judgment call. Is it right or wrong? I don't know, but it's the best I could come up with under the circumstances. Right. And so judgment is okay. It's life affirming. It's how we get through the day, making a choice. Do I take a left or a right? Do I use my Jeep or my other car? What are we going to do? So it's a judgment call each and every time. And you're right. Judgment is gotten a bad rap, but it's necessity for everything that we do in life.
As far as the physical world is concerned, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah. So you've probably heard the phrase, the expression, we are the sum of our experiences. Given all that we've talked about here today and knowing the kind of conversations that we typically have, how does that statement make you feel? Does it feel like a true statement, or does it feel like there might be something missing? What would you like to say about that?
Yeah, I hear that after our conversation, and it doesn't feel fully true. There may be some truth in it. I think that we're more than maybe what we even think we are. I think that this is one aspect of us. Our human experience is one aspect of the show's called Soul Empowerment. And so I feel like we're often talking from that soul perspective about human experience. And we're multidimensional, you know? And our soul, I think, is much grander than what we're consciously aware of as a human. I don't know for sure. I like to think about it in this way that, hey, maybe our soul can be anywhere at any time, having a completely parallel experience somewhere else in a different body, or maybe not. We might be on some planet somewhere. Maybe we're hanging out in Lemuria or Atlantis at the same time that we're having this conversation here. We don't really know. And we live in an amazing universe that also our human minds have limitations around our understanding of that universe, right? And so I think there's more here than meets the eye, right? So how could it be possibly fully, absolutely true that we are the sum of our experiences?
Things are not as they appear.
Yeah.
Sarah, what would you like to say about this?
I think from a human physical perspective, that I do feel I am the sum of my experiences, the experiences I have chosen to have in this life, and the choices that I have made of those experiences. But in respect of our soul, then absolutely not, sort of, but maybe even again, that is a yes, because the soul has chosen so many experiences over many, many different lifetimes, potentially on different planets, that it's an aspect of all of those experiences. It's gained from those experiences. So has it become the sum of its experiences? And it's really good to be able to say and play devil's advocate here, if you like. Who knows? Because we don't. I do feel that the experiences I have had have made me who I am today, and my reactions to them. So it isn't just I am the sum of my experiences. I am the sum of my experiences and the choices I have made from them. So it's adding that little bit to it.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And, it makes me think of the story. Neil Donald Walsh told this story, the Soul in the Sun, I think it was called, in his book, Conversations with God. And I kind of embraced it because it really, really touched me deeply. It's this idea that, once upon a time, all there was all that is. And all that is knew itself as all that is. There was nothing that was not a part of all that is, and there was nothing that all that is was not. But all that is, and I chose the name omnitude for this being because it was a little easier for me to say. So omnitude knew itself as all that is, but hadn't yet had the experience of itself as all that is. And so this posed a bit of a conundrum, a paradox, if you like. I can know myself as all that is, but not experience myself. And why is that? Because there's nothing that I am not. That is why. There is nothing that is not me. And this is where the idea comes for omnitude to say, well, then no problem. I'll just individuate myself into an infinite variety of energy forms throughout this universe, all over the place. And each one will be empowered to have his or her or its own experience. And together, all of those experiences will add up to the experience of all that is. That is the ultimate story. And so when anybody thinks, well, what's my point? I mean, I'm such an insignificant little, blip on the radar. No, that no matter how small you might think you are contributing to that overall experience. It's extremely important. And so, Gail, you talked about a soul having multiple locations simultaneously. Well, I think that's exactly right. I think that's true for all of us. We're all just temporary expressions of all that is, at least in this physical form, right? And we're all, because of that, we're not actually separated from all that is. We're all connected, because otherwise the experience wouldn't be collected together into one giant experience. This is a mind-blowing idea, and I still haven't figured out how to explain it properly. So I'm sorry if it sounds a little confusing, but that's kind of how I see it now. And so this idea is we are all part of Omnitude. We are collectively one with all that is, even though we appear superficially to have different kinds of experiences, different kinds of life structures, different kinds of, you name it, different bodies, different attitudes, all the rest of it. I think it's freaking amazing, personally.
You left us speechless.
Well, I do get kind of excited about that,
Yeah, well, yeah. I think this idea of being, a piece of that divine spark would be the words that I would use. But that desire, that human desire to have experiences, if it is true that we are part of Omnitude, yes, it sounds confusing and it's hard to put words to it. And yet at the same time, it completely makes sense. If we as humans desire experiences, then all that is would desire experience if we're a piece of that, right? So I hear you, David. and I also feel challenged in putting that into words in our limits of language.
It is limiting, isn't it? It is limiting. Yeah. When I was in India, we went through these rituals, and they're talking about the all and about ascending to the all, where instead of this bright white light, there is nothingness, but everything is there. And the feeling that you get, while I was visiting and was brought there, I didn't know if I was breathing. I didn't know anything because I was separate from my physical body. And so your explanation, David, is perfection in that it is all and nothing at the same time, and all the experiences that we all have come to it. And when we think about it, what do? We want to connect, all of us on this plane, right? We want to connect. And I think it comes to, we're all of that same energy. We are all of that same life force. We are all of that spark, that divine spark. And that is absolutely stunning and beautiful. And hopefully we can answer some of these questions one day, but we'll still strive every once a month to sit down and really talk it through. And I hope that anybody watching this, and Janet, thank you for being here. I hope that anyone seeing this can be sparked with that look to go forward on their own journey.
Right. I think Gail, you kind of hit it on the head. Trying to explain anything using these very, very limiting terms called words, it's ridiculous. And I every time I try and explain what this thing is for me, it just feels like a jumble. It's like cotton balls trying to come out of my mouth, you know? I can't quite get the meaning that I want. And I've tried writing it. I've tried everything. It seems like it's just a glimpse of the truth to me, and yeah.
This is where I would say we trust the energy.
Yeah.
We trust the energy that we're putting forth, because energy doesn't lie, and people will feel our intent and the emotion and the energy behind the words that we're struggling to use today.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, you were going to say something, Sarah?
I was just going to say, sort of, you use the word feel, and I think that's exactly what it's about. It's feel. If something feels right to you, if there's something feels wrong to you, feel it. It isn't about what goes up in here most of the time. It isn't about being able to put it into words, because most of the times people give us a taster of the sound, and it's just like, I don't know how to put it in words, but I definitely felt it, but I can't tell you how it felt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's the feeling. So feel. How does something feel to you? And go with the feeling.
Yeah, right. Beautiful. Well, thank you all for being here today, Gail, Scott, Sarah, and David. And thank you, folks, for being present and watching this, whether you're watching the live show or watching the recording. I just want to remind you that this show and all others are on my website at yourlifemasterycoach.com. So you can go and check them out there. And they're also on YouTube, so you can check them out there too. So with all that said, I want to say to everyone, thank you so much for being here. My name is David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach. Wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. We'll see you next time on Soul Empowerment. Bye-bye for now.